Right. Hello, everybody. I think we've got a few people still joining. So if you don't mind, I'll just give us another 20 seconds or so because I know a lot of people signed up for this one. I want to make sure everyone that can join is able to join, or everyone that wants to join is able to join. Meanwhile, lovely to see so many of you today. The relative popularity of our different talks and events does usually give us a little bit of a good read on what's on everyone's mind, and actually judging by the number of people signing up for today's webinar, high performance obviously seems to be a topic that's on everybody's minds at the moment. Right, I think we've got a fair group of participants now. So let me begin. We have 30 minutes, I believe, with plenty of time left over for Q&A. So I'll move us through fairly swiftly. Firstly, once again, a really big hello. Really appreciate you joining us today to talk about this topic. Very much, you know, very much sort of topical. We've heard a lot of it across all of our client work. It seems that every organization, in fact, that we come across at the moment is either striving to achieve high performance or to create a high performance culture. So what we'd like to do today is share some of what we've learned, touching on what we think high performance means and what it doesn't mean, and how we might collectively grasp it. Firstly, a few super quick notes about us. I'm Brook. I co-founded People Made, and I'm joined by my colleague Amity, who's the head of research at People Made. We're both in the strategy team, so we've got lots of practical experience in helping businesses find their way through change. And we do this by connecting people and business strategy, trying to untangle the knots to create some simplicity, clarity, and relevance for employees. We're lucky enough to do this with some incredible organizations right around the world. I'm sure you recognize a few of those names. And in fact, looking at our attendee list, some of you, in fact, might belong to some of these organizations. So hello to you folks. Right, that is enough about us. Let's bring us back to the topic at hand. We are going to structure the conversation like this. We're going to talk at first around, the importance of the topic, why this is on everybody's minds. Then we'd like to share a few thoughts about how you can define high performance. And then critically, I'll pass over to Amity, who's going to share some thoughts about what you can do to drive high performance in your own organization. And as I said earlier, our goal is to sort of trying to run through this, complete our sort of bit really in about 15 minutes or so, get us to about 20 past the hour, and then give ourselves 10 minutes for Q&A. Some fantastic people attending on the call today. So by all means, shoot some questions to Amity and I, but also equally, I'd love to open up those questions to the wider group as well. So feel free to jump on the chat if you'd like to share a thought. So firstly, so why is performance such a hot topic at the moment? And of course, it's because of change. It is crazy out there. Exec teams, I think, are looking out at the market and seeing new threats wherever they gaze. Competitors promising to do things faster and quicker and better through AI, and clients are expecting things faster and cheaper again because of AI, and all the time, people costs, energy costs, shipping, material costs, all of those are sort of ever marching upwards. And all of this is happening, of course, within a sort of geopolitical and economic condition that is incredibly hard to predict. So, unsurprisingly, this is creating a lot of anxiety within leadership teams, and also understandably, they're reaching for the big red performance button. Because I guess if the only thing that you can be certain of is that things are only going to get harder and more competitively, difficult, then making sure that you're operating it absolutely as well as you possibly can feels like a very easy goal to focus on. So let's first grab our first poll. I'd love to hear, and I'm sure you would also all be very interested to also hear what the pace of change looks like in each other's organization. So thank you, Amity, who's helping to manage this today. First poll here. Tell us just very, very quickly, how's sort of the pace of change feeling where you are? and here we have everything from the kind of very manageable up to sort of fast, unpredictable, constantly shifting to let us know what it's looking like where you are. And it'd be great. I'm sure everyone else would be very interested to hear as well. Um, Imogen, how are we doing on the polls there? Have we got everybody in yet? Very good. Okay, constantly shifting. Okay, thank you very much. That's unsurprising. Also, interestingly, nobody is calling it manageable right now. Um, I'm sure that probably won't come as a surprise to many of you. So now let's talk about what's often a bit of a gap in organizational thinking around this. Everyone's asking for high performance, but it's very noticeable how few organizations have a really clear sense of what they actually mean by high performance. So let me share 3 points with you that we think are important here. The first is that there isn't, we believe, one universal definition that's going to work for everyone. Businesses need to work out their own definition, we think, one that aligns with the way that value is created in their organization. So the meaning of high performance, therefore, needs to be built around the behaviors that directly contribute to your business success. And behaviors, this word behavior here is really key because I think our second point is that definitions of high performance need to measure the inputs, not just the outputs, needs to measure the how as well as the what. And this is quite a big deal because often this isn't what's happening right now. Organizations understandably are looking to the really easy things to measure, and they're usually kind of execution metrics. But the problem with this approach is that it doesn't really identify why or how you're achieving those outcomes. So that means you can't scale them, you can't repeat them, you can't protect the ways of working that are delivering them. And actually worse, I think there's a real danger that sort of notions of high performance can end up being built on behaviors that potentially have quite serious unintended consequences. Which means the reality is, we think, that many organizations currently striving for high performance are doing it in ways that might actually be to the detriment of the long-term health of the business. And I don't just mean here the sort of obvious things like employee burnout or attrition, and of course, bad as those things are, but also some of the more strategic disadvantages like loss of customer focus or inhibition to ownership and accountability. It can lead to a sort of misassessment of risk or poor long-term planning. So this isn't to say that businesses shouldn't be driving towards high performance. I think that's a really good thing. They absolutely should. But it's really important that they're pulling the right levers and measuring the right things. Otherwise, we create a lot of heat and noise in the business that potentially proves to be unsustainable or even counterproductive. So, another quick poll, be really interested to hear. How is high performance currently defined in your organization today? How are you defining it? I'd be really interested just to really get a quick sense check on whether, in fact, organizations have a clear definition of high performance. And if they do, is it sort of outcomes or behavioral, or is it around ways of working, or perhaps it's not that clearly defined where you are? Imogen, I'll leave you to ping up the results to that when a few people have answered it. But I'll be really curious to hear what you think about that. As you're voting on that, let me move to the sort of third and final point, which is that, of course, AI is absolutely intrinsic to all of this. Right now, it's probably the biggest source of that kind of light and heat that I was talking about a few moments ago. And you know what? It's undoubtedly enabling faster and more efficient processing of tasks. So it certainly makes it look like we're performing better. But it's really important to keep in mind the value that this ultimately delivers, ensuring that we're seeing enhancement to kind of quality and productivity, better customer experiences, all the things that ultimately really matter. Because, and this is, I suppose, the last point that I'd like to sort of leave you with. AI is the tool, it's not the strategy. It can help fuel high performance, but only if it's used to enhance the right ways of working. So, how do we do that? Let me now pass you over to Amity to talk to you a little bit more about how that works. Really interested to hear though the sort of views from the attendees about what high performance looks like and how it's defined in your organization. Quite a sort of even split actually around sort of targets, metrics, and behaviors. Not much around ways of working though. And obviously a few of you still in organizations where it's not being clearly designed or defined yet. So thanks for that, Amity. Hopefully, especially on the ways of working point, we will perhaps change your mind on that, or at least build an argument as to why that should be part of your thinking about high performance. Amity, let me pass the mic to you.
Oh, thank you. Hi everyone. I'll now shift the focus to what businesses can do to drive performance. Before I do, though, I just want to share a little bit of what we've been seeing out there, because this probably won't come as a surprise to many of you. But more recently, a lot of our work has directly involved performance and creating performance-centric cultures for businesses across a range of industries. And, while performance does look different across different companies, there are a couple of common barriers that we see many businesses fall into, and I think they're worth calling out before we go into looking at solutions. The first barrier is really around having an unclear vision and an unclear overarching direction. Now, this is very topical because it is very uncertain times, and it can be really hard to even see what the next day looks like, let alone the next week. And creating that sort of 3, 5 year plan just might not be possible right now. But essentially, what we're asking of our people is to be ships running at full speed with no compass, really. So what we see and how we see this shows up is in having unclear priorities, or having teams with different, or departments with conflicting goals. And we also see it in employees in not being able to see where they fit into the bigger picture, and therefore not being able to think strategically or be proactive or entrepreneurial. So we're seeing it sort of trickle down right through to employees. The second one, or the second barrier that we're seeing, is really around cultures that are focusing on endurance rather than effectiveness. And I think this kind of goes back to what Brook was saying around the lack of a definition when it comes to performance. Many businesses don't define what they mean by that. And as a result, many misunderstand it as just simply working harder, working faster, or working longer hours. And when we speak to employees around, what is needed to succeed in their workplaces at the moment, these days we're sort of overwhelmingly hearing things like performing under pressure, working at pace, and being comfortable with ambiguity. And while obviously these are all great traits, positive traits, if we focus too much on these, though, it can throw out the balance with other traits that we know are necessary for driving performance, like strategic thinking, like self-guided upskilling and learning, like creativity and collaboration as well. So the risk is here that we're not really rewarding general excellence and effectiveness and learning. Actually, what we're rewarding is how much pressure people can absorb, and that's not sustainable in the long run. And then the third theme that we're really seeing, or barrier that we are seeing, is around weaker reward and recognition. Now, this is not to say, this is not about pats on the back or end of year bonuses. What we're hearing is that as workplaces evolve and as roles become more fluid, the path forward becomes less defined. And while the sort of phasing out of that linear career path is not necessarily a bad thing, without an alternative philosophy around growth, many are starting to feel a sense of stagnation, which disincentivizes performance, or it provides people with a sense that the goalposts keep shifting, because performance is relative, right? If everyone is a high performer, what is high performance? So it starts to become a little bit nebulous if there isn't a sort of philosophy around growth and where you want people to put their energy. And I can't stress how important this is, because if it's left for too long, it then ends up leading towards resentment and a sense that the progress isn't being shared, and it almost starts being sort of counterintuitive. And people start taking their foot off the gas because they're not sure where to put that energy. So what this tells us is that performance isn't pressure. it's clarity, and it's clarity and it's empowerment. It isn't simply about asking people to do more, but it's about providing clear understanding on where effort matters and defining what performance looks like in your organization. It's about removing the barriers that are getting in the people's way and giving people the tools and training and support to sort of fuel the business's ambitions, and reinforcing the behaviors that lead to success and giving people a reason to push. And if you think about it, if someone came up to you and said, I want you to run really fast, but they didn't tell you in which direction, there were hurdles in the way, there was quicksand, there were U-turns, and there was very minimal incentive for doing it, would you do it? Probably not. Yet in these uncertain times, when businesses are sort of holding fast to see what's going to happen with the markets and the economy and AI, it's exactly what a lot of businesses are asking from their people. So what then does good look like? If we've talked about some of the challenges, what should we be striving for? And as we've said throughout, it varies from organization to organization, but there are sort of three common characteristics we see across high performing organizations. The first is that they manage their time, their energy, and their attention levels. So a study on super teams, as they were called, by Harvard Business Review found that high-performing teams minimize distractions and are 50% better at avoiding unnecessary meetings. They also use those meetings for two things: alignment and unlocking challenges. They don't use meetings for status updates. And it's also really common to see time blocks for things like thinking time, for getting things done, and also recharge time. So taking more of that energy coin approach, which you may have come across when it comes to psychology and just generally managing energy across life. The second thing that high performing cultures do well is that they don't just collaborate, they actively make one another better. So they treat feedback as the norm and something that all employees give every day as part of their workflow, not just when performance reviews come around. And they build on one another's work and keep an open mind, emphasizing that good ideas can come from anywhere. And Netflix is a really good example of that with their radical candor feedback, their radical candor approach to feedback. So they actively they promote a position that withholding feedback is disloyal to their colleagues and to other employees in the business. And they position feedback as fundamental to helping others grow. And then the third theme that we see is that they're constantly building skills and improving over time. So a study by Deloitte found that organizations with stronger learning cultures are 52% more productive and 17% more profitable than their peers. One of the key differences is that they make space to experiment and try new things. So the same study by Harvard Business Review that I mentioned earlier found that super teams run nearly 48% more experiments than average teams. And importantly, I think as part of that, they normalize mistakes and wins as part of this learning and experimenting. So they're not becoming a victim of their own success and letting that impact their sort of appetite for risk. They take it all on board and treat everything, both the wins and the losses, as learnings. So if performance is top of mind for you right now, which if you're on this call, I'm guessing it probably is, there are some things you can get started on. So the first is really around aligning your people and your culture with your business ambitions, being really clear on what you're asking people to move towards, what is the North Star, and what behaviors, mindsets, and ways of working will actually help to deliver that ambition, and taking a very organizational approach to that. Often organizations talk about performance without clearly defining what success looks like culturally or behaviorally. They speak only in terms of the outputs and not the inputs, as Brook mentioned earlier. Secondly, is really to work on getting a live understanding of the blockers that are getting in the way. So some of the most valuable insights come from simply talking to people and creating space for honest dialogue around what's making it harder for them to do their best work. And that honest dialogue is the hard part. I think, not everyone wants, particularly in a high performance organization, wants to talk about what their barriers are or their roadblocks or their gaps are. But creating that space to talk, safe space to talk about it is really important because it allows you to see that sometimes the blockers are structural or strategic, but often they're just the smaller day-to-day frustrations that gradually impact and erode energy, motivation, and effectiveness. I think on a project recently I was working on, someone spoke about these little blockers as just death by 1,000 paper cuts. And so being able to sort of identify them, you can address them and hopefully remove some things without having to go through a massive program of work. And finally, the last thing you can do is really create a shared understanding of what good performance looks like in your organization specifically. Performance can be a loaded term, and for many, it's associated with the pressure to deliver more, with working longer hours, and with having to do more with less. So, defining what performance means in your organization, what it looks like, not just the metric and how it's measured, and then the layers within that, because as I said earlier, performance is relative, will help to create the conditions that people need in order to achieve performance in a healthy and a sustainable way. And I think
Fantastic.
that's it. Time for questions.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Hopefully, everybody, you enjoyed a kind of that concentrated blast of 15 minutes of ideas, thinking, and point of view. But as we said earlier, we are hoping to sort of, run sort of 10 minutes or so now. Either Amity or I can answer any questions that you might have. Otherwise, equally, if anyone on the call would like to sort of chip in with any kind of comments or thoughts, that would be great too. Um, I'm just looking in at the chat function now. Imogen, are you across any of the Q&A? Have you got anything there for us? Have I got one there? Is that someone asking who's doing it?
One, I think one has come through on who is doing high performance culture well and what are they doing right.
Um, shall I pick up that one quickly? And there's a couple of organisations that I think we've come across in our work that I think are doing really interesting things there. Amadeus actually comes to mind, who I think did a really fantastic job. It's funny, Amity, when you were talking earlier about how high performing organisations use their meeting time better, that was a really big focus for them. But you won't find much online about Amadeus. So the example that I would point you to, if anyone would like to sort of know a little bit more about this, is honestly Netflix. Um, Partly because they do a really great job of it, but also partly because it's really well documented. So if you want to sort of look for a case study where you'll be able to kind of dig out lots of information, Netflix is a good place to go. But I think that there were probably four things that Netflix do really, really well that I think are worth other organizations, kind of considering for themselves. I think the first is being really, really focused on talent density. Brilliant people get held back by mediocre people. So at Netflix, they make a really deliberate choice that if someone isn't performing at a high level, they get the severance package and they're invited to go. So I think there's a real relentless focus on kind of quality and people. I think the second one is this idea of kind of radical candor. I think Netflix really institutionalized honest feedback. And they have this idea of what is called a sort of a farming culture rather than a mining one. So rather than sort of looking for answers, instead feedback is continual, it's live, it's in the moment, and it's not sort of hoarded up. I think they're really good at also as a leadership team at Netflix providing context, not control. So leadership there are kind of treat themselves as the kind of the pointers of direction, and they're very explicit around what goals are and what success looks like. But then they do a really good job of sort of stepping back and letting, getting out of the way and letting their people do what they've got to do. And I think finally they do pay very well. They top of market compensation, which of course always helps to create a high performance culture as well. That might not be within everyone's gift, but I think certainly that sort of unapologetic strive for quality in people, radical candor, and treating leaders as context setters rather than controllers. I think three important takeaways. So yeah, just a couple off my mind. Hope that was
We've
helpful.
got we've got two more questions in the chat box, so I'll read them out for you because I think Imogen's sort of struggling with her mic. The first question is from Jess. How can charities benefit from high performance with the consideration that they generally don't tend to have the specialist roles like org design, talent development, that look at high performance?
How can charities benefit? So again, I'd love to open up if anyone else any sort of like thoughts on that. Um, I think that the lack of specialist roles that you talk on there, I think is difficult. But I think the one thing that charities do have, that organisations I think struggle with outside of the third sector, is I think there are intrinsic levels of kind of trust and commitment there, because there's a sort of a shared belief in a really obvious and purposeful goal that the charity is sort of moving towards. So I think that they can benefit from it both in terms of, trying to harvest, more innovative thinking around donation strategies. I know that charities often struggle to find new ways of encouraging people, to get involved. And so I think thinking about high performance from an innovation lens is one angle that you might look at. But I think also trying to, as much as possible, harvest and direct, through those techniques that Amity was talking about, harness and direct people's kind of, intrinsic commitment. And perhaps in a charity setting, perhaps thinking about high performance less about sort of doing more and faster and asking more from people, but perhaps thinking about how everyone's time, which is so precious, can be like absolutely as well spent as it possibly can be, so that everybody is focused on sort of common goals. I'll give it some more thought though, because I've not done that question justice. It's a very big question, and just a few thoughts off the top of my head there. Anyway, hopefully something there was vaguely useful or interesting.
One more question for you, Brooke, in the comments. Someone said, love the comments on the importance of ways of working and inputs. When calendar invites and emails don't seem to stop, how can we begin to make this happen in practice?
Haha. Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it starts with leadership and role modeling and people having the permission to turn down things. I think that a lot of this stuff is habitual. Yeah, thanks, Jess. I think a lot of this stuff is habitual, and I think until people that feel like they've genuinely got the permission to kind of turn things down, it's quite difficult for people to sort of police individually. Where I have seen it work well is where leaders give everybody permission to turn things down, and it almost become the institutional norm that it's sort of like, actually, I'm only going to be there if I really, really have got something, meaningful to add. And so instead of attendance becoming sort of just the accepted norm that everybody turns up, instead the accepted norm is that you only turn up, if you really need to be there. So I think sort of having some clear parameters, like what are meetings for. As Amity mentioned earlier, being really sort of intentional about what is meant to be gotten out of a meeting. I think that really
Mm,
helps. So everyone knows when you do and when you don't have meetings, and then permission led by and
yeah.
role modeled by leaders, should be the first to start showing and acting by example that it's okay to say no. Amity, would you add
I
to that?
Yeah, I would also build on that. I think it depends on the scope really of the change that you're requiring of people. If it is just sort of meeting and calendar invites, or if it's a sort of broader culture shift that you're requiring of people to reach, a more performance centric mindset within the business. One of the ways that we think about it from a culture perspective is around thinking about or identifying what are the levers that drive culture within your organizations. In some, leadership is really strong, and that is a massive driver of the organization. In some that are more grassroots, they might be more relationships driven. So understanding what are the levers that drive your culture, and then tap into those to make these changes happen and to sort of drive accountability around them and make sure that, yes, one, you have the clarity as Brooke just suggested, which is really important, but to make sure that people actually do it and to make that change happen, it's around understanding what is it that drives the culture and exploring that.
Yeah, thanks, Amity. There was one more as well. We're pretty much out of time, but I'll quickly just read it out and we'll just maybe share like 30 seconds on this, and then whoever sent the question through, we can drop them a line directly. But someone said, what about understanding how people work to their optimum from a mindset and behaviors perspective within a team and across teams and individuals? How do individuals think and behave? I think what you're getting at there perhaps is sort of recognizing that what's optimum, or what it takes to get to your optimum, might be different for different individuals, and it depends on their own sort of mindset and behavior. And I think that's a really, really good point. And I think it's probably behoves businesses and organizations to do a better job of actually understanding really what makes their people tick, and what unlocks high performance amongst them. We know that there are some commonalities. All people respond well to clarity, but I think in some organizations they want more freedom, more space. They might want more collaboration or less collaboration, more meeting time or less meeting time. I think it all goes back to that notion of working out what's right for your organization, and what really delivers value, in what you do and where you are. And perhaps actually it might even mean, allowing high performance to be defined at a more sort of team level scale as well. But yeah, again, a great question that probably deserves more time and thought than we can give it today. Um, but that's it. We're actually running overtime now. So we promise to keep these little webinars short and sweet. Thank you so much to all of you who joined us today. Really appreciate it. I know how busy everyone is, how much stuff that everyone has on their plates, and how many other things you get invited to. So thanks for spending a little bit of time with us today. Hope you found it useful. We'll share the deck with everybody. We've got a recording too. And of course, it goes without saying, anyone wants to chat more about these things, even just to get some more sort of feedback, thoughts and ideas, please let us know. We love talking about these things. So we will be very, very happy to chat some more. Otherwise, we'll let you get on with the rest of your days. Take it easy, everybody. And thanks again.
Thank you.